She had walked 5 miles through the December cold to find him, the cowboy who had saved her life exactly 1 year ago, not knowing if he even remembered her name. The December wind swept across the Arizona territory, carrying with it the memory of snow and the promise of another cold night. Elena Sunrise stood at the edge of the small town of Dusty Creek, her dark eyes scanning the weathered buildings and frozen mud streets. Her heart pounded beneath the worn wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since that terrible Christmas Eve when everything changed. She remembered the blood on the snow, the sound of gunfire echoing through the canyon, and the moment she thought her life would end, the renegades who had attacked her family's camp had shown no mercy. Her father fell first, then her mother. Elena had run into the frozen wilderness, her moccasins leaving desperate tracks in the white powder. They had chased her for miles. When she finally collapsed near a frozen creek, unable to run another step, she had made peace with death. The cold had already begun to claim her fingers and toes. Her breath came in ragged gasps that burned her lungs. She could hear the riders approaching, their horses snorting clouds of steam into the bitter air. Then came the sound she would never forget, a single rifle shot, clean and precise, followed by the thunder of hooves riding away. When she opened her eyes, she saw him. He was tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the gray winter sky. His face was weathered from years under the relentless sun, and his eyes were the pale blue of spring water. He had dismounted from a chestnut mare and walked toward her slowly, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Easy now," he had said, his voice deep and gentle. "I am not going to hurt you." She had tried to speak, but the cold had stolen her words. He removed his own heavy coat and wrapped it around her trembling body. The warmth of it, carrying his scent of leather and pine, had felt like being born again. He carried her to his horse and rode through the night to reach a small cabin hidden in the hills. For 3 days he tended to her frostbitten hands and feet, feeding her warm broth and keeping the fire burning bright. He never asked questions, never demanded explanations. He simply cared for her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. On Christmas morning, she woke to find him sitting by the window, watching the snow fall. She learned his name was Thomas Brennan, and he had been a cavalry scout before trading his uniform for the quiet life of a horse rancher. "Why did you help me?" she had asked, her voice still rough from disuse. He had turned to look at her, and something in his blue eyes made her breath catch. Because it was the right thing to do, he answered simply. For 2 weeks she stayed in his cabin while her strength returned. They spoke little at first, but gradually their silences became comfortable. He taught her a few words of English, and she taught him phrases in her native tongue. He showed her how he trained his horses with patience rather than force, and she showed him the healing properties of the plants that grew near his land. She found herself watching him when he thought she was not looking, the way his calloused hands moved with surprising gentleness, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fire. On her last night in the cabin, she had worked up the courage to touch his face. He had frozen at her touch, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Elena," he had whispered, and the sound of her name in his voice was like a prayer. But she had pulled away. Her people needed her. The survivors of the attack had scattered, and she needed to find them, to help them rebuild. She could not stay with this strange cowboy, no matter how much her heart urged her to. She left before dawn, taking only the memories of his kindness and the echo of her name on his lips. For months she traveled across the territory, searching for her scattered tribe. She found some of them living with distant relatives, others working on ranches, a few who had disappeared entirely. The work of bringing them together consumed her days, but her nights belonged to memories of Thomas Brennan. She dreamed of his blue eyes, his gentle hands, the safety she had felt in his presence. No man had ever treated her with such respect, such genuine care. Among her own people, she was considered too independent, too strong-willed. The young warriors who had once sought her attention had been driven away by her sharp tongue and sharper mind. But Thomas had never tried to change her. He had simply accepted her as she was. As the seasons changed, so did her certainty. She told herself she would forget him, that the feelings she harbored were merely gratitude, nothing more. But gratitude did not explain the ache in her chest when she saw a chestnut horse in the distance, or the way her heart leaped whenever she heard a deep voice speaking English. By autumn, she knew she had to return. She had to know if what she felt was real, if he had felt it too, or if she had imagined the connection between them. The not knowing was worse than any rejection could be. Now, standing at the edge of Dusty Creek on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, she was terrified. The town was preparing for the holiday. Wreaths hung on doors, and the warm glow of candles flickered in windows. Children ran through the streets, their laughter carrying on the cold air. Elena felt like a ghost from another world, invisible and out of place. She asked a woman outside the general store if she knew Thomas Brennan. The woman's eyes narrowed with suspicion at first, but something in Elena's expression must have softened her. The horse rancher? His place is about 5 miles north past the old Miller farm. Follow the creek until you see the windmill. Elena nodded her thanks and began walking. The cold bit at her exposed skin, but she barely felt it. Her mind was too full of questions, too consumed by hope and fear. What if he had forgotten her? What if he had found someone else? What if she arrived only to discover that the connection she remembered had been nothing but a lonely man's kindness toward a desperate stranger? The miles passed slowly. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. By the time she saw the windmill, her legs ached and her hands were numb despite the gloves she wore. The cabin looked exactly as she remembered it, small but sturdy, with a thin trail of gray rising from the chimney. The corral beside it held several horses, including a chestnut mare that made her heart skip. She stopped at the edge of the property, suddenly unable to move forward. This was foolish. She should turn around, go back to her people, forget this impossible dream. Then the cabin door opened, and he stepped out. Thomas Brennan looked different than she remembered. Thinner, perhaps, with more gray in his hair. But his eyes were the same, that impossible pale blue that had haunted her dreams for a year. He saw her and stopped. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind whispered through the dry grass, and somewhere in the distance, a horse nickered softly. Elena? His voice carried across the space between them, full of disbelief and something else, something that sounded like hope. She tried to speak, but her throat was too tight. Instead, she simply nodded. He crossed the distance between them in long strides, stopping just inches away. His breath formed clouds in the cold air, and she could see the rapid pulse at his throat. "I thought I would never see you again," he said, his voice rough. "Every day I wondered if you were safe, if you had found your people, if you ever thought of me." "I thought of you," she managed to say. "Every day, every night." His hand rose slowly, trembling slightly, and touched her cheek. The warmth of his skin against hers was like coming home. "Why did you come back?" he asked. She looked into his eyes and found the answer she had been seeking. It was there, shining as bright as any star, the same love that burned in her own heart. "Because I had to know," she said. "I had to know if what I felt was real. And what do you feel?" The question hung between them, fragile and enormous. Elena had never been good with words, especially in this language that still felt foreign on her tongue. But some things transcended language. She reached up and placed her hand over his heart. Beneath her palm, she could feel it beating, strong and steady like the man himself. "I feel like I found something I did not know I was looking for," she said. I feel like the cold cannot touch me when I am near you. I feel like I want to know what tomorrow looks like with you in it." Thomas closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I have been living like half a man since you left," he confessed. "Going through the motions, taking care of the horses, but feeling like something essential was missing. I told myself I was a fool, that you would never return, that I had no right to love a woman who belonged to a different world." "I belong to no world," Elena said, "only to myself, and I choose to give my heart to you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as though she might disappear if he let go. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent she had never forgotten, leather and pine and something uniquely him. "Stay," he whispered into her hair. "Please, Elena, stay with me." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "It will not be easy. Your people may not accept me. My people may not understand." "I do not care what anyone thinks," he said fiercely. "I only care about you. We will make our own world, our own family. Whatever comes, we will face it together." She smiled then, the first real smile she had allowed herself in a year. "Then I will stay." That night, on Christmas Eve, they sat together by the fire in his small cabin. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the harsh landscape in a blanket of white. Inside, there was only warmth and the quiet joy of two souls who had finally found each other. Thomas had prepared a simple meal, and they ate together, stealing glances like shy children. Afterward, he brought out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I bought this last year," he admitted, "after you left. I suppose I was hoping even then that you would return." Elena unwrapped it carefully and found a silver comb, delicate and beautiful, with small turquoise stones set along its spine. "It reminded me of you," he said, "strong and beautiful." She felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever given her such a gift. "I have nothing to give you," she said. He took her hands in his. "You came back. That is the only gift I will ever need." Later, as the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall, they talked about their dreams and their fears, their hopes for the future. Elena told him about her journey, about the fragments of her tribe she had managed to reunite. Thomas spoke of his own loneliness, of the nights he had spent wondering if she was safe. When she finally grew tired, he offered her his bed and prepared to sleep by the fire. "No," she said softly, "stay with me, just hold me. I have been cold for so long." He lay beside her, wrapping his arms around her as naturally as if they had done this 1,000 times before. His warmth surrounded her, and for the first time in a year, Elena felt truly safe. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he answered. "I think I loved you from the moment I saw you in the snow." Outside, the world was silent and white, but inside the cabin, love had found its way home. Two hearts that had been wandering, lost and incomplete, had finally found each other again. As midnight approached, marking the beginning of Christmas Day and the anniversary of their first meeting, Elena smiled against his chest. "1 year ago, you saved my life," she said. "1 year ago, you gave me a reason to live," he replied. And in the quiet of that holy night, they held each other close, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would never be alone again. The Apache girl and the cowboy had found something rare and precious. A love strong enough to bridge two worlds, brave enough to defy convention, and deep enough to last a lifetime. The snow kept falling, blessing the land with its purity, as though the heavens themselves celebrated the reunion of two souls who were always meant to find each other.